Hello and welcome to episode 421 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Now on today's episode, I'm really excited because I get to be joined by an absolute legend. I honestly believe he deserves that title. I'm joined by Neil Fallon from one of the best bands in the world, Clutch. Anyone that loves music, anyone that's ever played guitar, anyone that's been in a band will know Clutch. They're one of the greatest bands out there. If you love rock music and everything that comes with it, Clutch are the band for you. The good news is, as you're listening to this, the band have actually announced now they're going to be doing a celebration tour of their debut self-titled album. There's UK dates at the end of the year and I'm going to be there and you need to too. It's going to be so good and the band are absolutely brilliant. I've seen them at festivals, I've seen them at their own gigs in the past. The energy, the performance, everything from it is unreal. And it's what you expect from a great band like Clutch. And on today's interview, we get to talk all about the band's history, Neil's songwriting, all about the band, and just all the stuff you normally get from an episode of Mark and Me. And that interview will be coming up in just a couple of minutes' time. But on every episode of Mark and Me, I always like to use the intro to touch base and talk about the last episode that came out. It only came out a few days ago and I was joined by Mia Ray, an amazing singer, a great songwriter and an amazing performer. And the interview blew up. I want to say a massive thanks to everyone that took the time to share it, especially Mia and the record label. And I got to see a whole new fan base from Australia and new fans across Europe signing up to stuff like Facebook, Twitter, following me on Instagram. And I'm so grateful. So thanks to all those people that tuned in. And I hope you all enjoyed the interview just as much as me. But today it's all about Clutch. It should always be all about Clutch. And this interview I really hope you all enjoy. So here's me and Neil talking all things music. So Neil, thank you for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Neil, what I do with all guests that come on, and it doesn't matter what walk of life you've been on, is I always like to take it right back to the very start because I'm always intrigued when we go down memory lane, those first albums, not that you were buying as a teenager, but before then, those first albums that maybe with your pocket money or maybe someone in the family or a friend had given you that made you absolutely fall in love with music.
Well, I think the first albums would have been whatever was in my father's record collection, like a lot of us. Your parents' musical tastes you get by default. And it was a lot of the kind of usual suspects for his generation, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, a lot of American folk music. And then my very first albums that I would get, whether it would be asking for like a birthday gift or a Christmas gift, again, weren't that unique for my generation either. It was like Van Halen 1984.
Nice.
The Police, Synchronicity, that kind of stuff. Then at some point, I was lent a cassette by a friend, like when I was in high school, of the Bad Brains' first album.
Wow.
And that kind of that split my wig.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I was like the right album at the right time, in my adolescence. And I just needed to know more about bands like that. And that kind of set me off into the trajectory that I'm still on.
Were you listening to those lyrics at the time thinking, finally someone understands what I'm going through? Finally, everyone else is angry, not just me, and, fuck the world.
Yeah, and they were, that band in particular were so unique because they were so fast and so aggressive, but ultimately had a very positive message.
Yeah.
But I was also kind of naive because they were a local band. And I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time with bands like that and Fugazi,
Wow.
uh, and seeing these bands at a young age, kind of assuming that's how it was everywhere. Um, and that's not the case. I was just very fortunate to be in this particular spot at that particular time. Missed out on a lot of the kind of golden age of DC hardcore, like Minor Threat. I was too young to go see those shows, but I did get to see some really good ones.
That leads nicely, actually. I always am intrigued by the first gigs, and I've said it over 400 times on this podcast because people always ask again, what was yours, Mark? But I was very lucky. Green Day were one of my first ever gigs on their
Mm.
Dookie tour, so I'm 42 years old. So for me, that was like mind blowing. I couldn't believe three people on stage could make that much noise. I was like, how are they doing this? Because they didn't have an
Mhm.
extra guitarist then. There was no session musicians. It was raw, and it made me want to go home, get a guitar, pick it up, and for the rest of my life try and be like Billy Joe Armstrong. But I wondered that first introduction to live music that you remember where, the bass cab would send that kind of vibrations into your chest, the hairs on your neck would stick up, and you were like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Were you lucky? Was it a great band or was it an embarrassing one you don't tell people?
Well, again, my first one of my earliest shows of seeing bands like that was again the Bad Brains. That would have been in 1988. And I think that was the first time I walked out of a club and I was like, this is a lot like a religious experience,
Yeah.
where you feel elevated, whether it's just the adrenaline or just this. And I don't really remember much of the show except walking out like with my jaw on the floor. Um, but to answer your question, I never was of the mind like I want to be in a rock and roll band. It was Tim and John Paul were the guys in high school that were like, I'm going to be in a rock and roll band. I was a little bit more skeptical. I got it hammered into my head that that was not a viable career choice. Um, so don't set yourself up for disappointment. But then years went by, and more years went by, and then I realized, oh wait, I am doing this.
Were
Um,
you under pressure to get a real job? Were your parents like, look, son, this is a dream. Not everyone becomes the next Mick Jagger or John Lennon. You've got to probably get a proper job and have this as a hobby. Or were you like, no, fuck you, I'm gonna do this?
well, I think honestly, it was never really said. It was more implied, and I still think to this day, despite the fact that I'm 53, I've been doing this more than half of my life.
Yeah.
There's a bit of uh, disbelief on my father's part that this is still going on, these shenanigans. But I think they finally came to the realization that this has been a real thing, and it's also been a incredible blessing as far as an education goes, like the travel that goes along with the musician's life. I'm so spoiled. I've got to see so many places and meet people on a real level, not like a tourist, circuit.
Yeah.
And it's been an education that I think is a very rare thing to get, and I'm super appreciative of it.
Obviously, you said you've done it for over half your life. Do you remember? Did you do the whole college Battle of the Bands thing and covers bands and all that before Clutch? What was the kind of introduction for playing music? Or surely your first band wasn't fortunate enough to be the band that you are still in now?
It's pretty close to it.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
we well, we all went to high school together, and I was in a band with John Paul and Dan, and we were called Moral Minority. And I have the impression that we called ourselves a straight edge band, but I think our we played pretty fast and loose with those parameters.
I like the
And
band name. It's cool.
yeah, well, it was very, and I listened to it now, and we had a different singer at the time. I was playing guitar, not very well. And then we left high school and I went to college, and I got a call from John Paul asking if I would fill in because their singer, and this at this point the band was called Glut Trip, couldn't make a show, and Tim was in this iteration of the band,
Right.
and I filled in, and then shortly thereafter, John Paul asked me. I remember very well. He said, "Can you sing regular for us?" And when I heard him say that, I thought he meant like he thought my singing was abnormal.
Can
can,
you just change your whole style for us,
can you
please,
just
dude?
sing regular for us? And I was
Yeah,
like, well, what do you mean? What don't you like? He goes, no, I mean, can you sing regularly, like on an
all the
ongoing?
time. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, sure. And that's how that started. And we changed the name. It was only about a year after high school. And that's pretty much my first and only band.
How cool is that, though?
It is very cool. It's a very rare thing too. I see musicians, bang their heads up against the wall trying to just get out of their own town
Yeah,
and not have that chance. Sometimes it's fate. Sometimes it's self-inflicted. There's a good deal of, I, th I think your luck gets increased by the more you work, but
yeah.
sometimes life just throws you curveballs that you don't see coming. But thankfully, we've been able to, be, knuckleheaded enough about this that we're still doing it.
The thing is with yourself and Clutch, and I say this with full respect, it wasn't like an overnight success. Sometimes you see a band that come out with this hit single straight away. They're absolutely huge. They're number one. They're playing all these incredible tours, and it happens so quick. You don't know how the band can really take a step back and digest. But you've always worked really hard, and obviously those first gigs weren't absolute huge. Supporting arenas and download festival main stage. You've worked your I feel like you've earned the right to now be where you are, and it's took time and dedication and probably lots of hurdles along the way.
Sure.
But when you started out and you changed the band name and you are now a full-time singer, did you realistically have any like expectations like how did you set yourself milestones as a band, or were you just enjoying the ride of playing music, traveling, and hopefully making it a living?
I think more the latter. I was just kind of just along for the ride in a lot of
Yeah,
ways, with a bit of a fear of thinking, okay, when this is over, what am I going to do? Um, I went to college. I got a degree in English because I like reading and writing.
yeah,
Um, and that's another thing where people say, well, what are you going to do with that degree? That doesn't have any practical applications. But it ended up being like the best thing for what I ended up doing. Just to kind of in a very secure, roundabout way.
of course.
Uh, um, and I think once I kind of not came to terms, but said, okay, this is what I do, it became not it didn't become easier, but I became much more protective about it and taking it much more seriously and realizing what a enormous um, gift and opportunity this is. To make a living in the creative arts is a pretty rare thing. And I was kind of just, it was thrown into my lap. And I feel guilty for those early years of taking it totally for granted. But when you're in your early 20s, you're taking everything for granted. Um,
Exactly. You don't know what the hell is life's about.
no,
Even in
no.
my 30s, it's only about my 40th I think I started to think, "Oh shit, I need to grow up."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
You
there's
know?
just sort of a sweet you don't want to grow up too much though.
No.
There's sort of like this, I don't know, like my dad thinking about like the way he was raised, and it's almost as this Victorian mindset. It's like unless you're miserable, you're not working hard. Like you're
It's a weird
supposed
way
to.
to look at it, it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's, man, to be able to, and also there's the saying that they say if you do something that you love, you never work a day in your life. I think that's horseshit,
Yeah.
because if you really love it, you work twice as hard to keep it that way. It's not disposable. I mean, people who do artists, it's an extension of themselves, and they have to scratch that itch.
Do you know what as well I think is important? You've raised a really good point. Is I love podcasting, right? I love talking to people. I would do it. I've done it for 8 years and I hope I can still do it when I'm 70, 80 years old. I still want to keep doing it. But I am working every day because I'm so passionate about it that if I was just going into an office and doing accountancy for a big, huge corporation, when I go home at night, I would switch off because I wouldn't care. I'd be like, right, I'm going home. I've done my bloody 8 hour shift. I don't
Mm.
care what happens anymore. But if you do something that you love, especially being an artist or a creative person like yourself, you never get to switch off because you're always thinking about maybe your next song or your next lyric, or something might inspire you, or something might think, I'm going to write about that. So you can't actually ever say you're not working, because everything that happens to you could become the next thing that you write about.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think any artist, whether they be visual artists or music or sculptor, writers, poets, that their sensory experiences are everything.
Yeah.
And then they process that in their brain and um, create something out of nothing. And it is work, because you got to. I mean, I'm of the opinion you have to write a lot of garbage to get some good stuff. Most of it ends up on the cutting room floor. Uh, but but when you get those moments and you realize you make something you like, there's no satisfaction quite like that. It's the best. It can be the most frustrating thing in the world and the most like satisfying thing at the same time.
You talked earlier about doing Clutch as long as you could, and, hoping that it would take off and become enough. Was there ever a plan B, or were you too focused that Clutch would have to be your sole reason to do what you do? Was there ever like a backup plan where you're like, fuck, if this just doesn't
Yeah.
work and we can't get out of our hometown, then I'm going to be a film director, or I'm gonna write English books, or I'm gonna, was there a plan B that you were like, I'm gonna have to think of an alternative in case the luck just doesn't happen for me?
Um, at best, I was thinking I would go back to school, kind
Yeah.
of just to defer that choice.
Give me
Uh,
another 3 years, guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly enjoyed school
Yeah.
in college. I liked academics. I'm not saying I was great at it, but I enjoyed the environment of just learning about stuff. I know
Yeah.
that's vague, but it's kind of its own reward. And I probably would have looked into maybe teaching at some point. Um, I don't know why. My mom was a teacher for many years, and I saw, it's brutal as far as
My
workload.
wife's a teacher, and I see every day just how feral the kids can be now and how
Ah,
brutal the days are. But I also see just how much she gets out of it. And when she finds that little golden moment of a child that wants to learn or
mhm.
does something that makes it all worthwhile, I'm like, that seems like the most rewarding job in the entire world. But you have to go through hell to find those exclusive, rare diamonds that want to shine.
Yeah, my mom taught seventh grade for like 20 some
Oh,
years.
seventh grade out.
Yeah, that's like the worst. It's like the
Yeah.
absolute worst grade for anybody involved. Uh, I did this is, you can probably cut this out of
No,
your
I want it
podcast.
all, man. I like to keep
Yeah.
everything in.
The Years ago, we moved into a new house and I had to get a um, permit approved
Right.
because we did some modifications, and it could be really bureaucratic and awful and expensive. And I was dreading this. And the guy came, the permit inspector, and he was supposed to walk through the house. And he goes, Neil Fallon, is your mom a teacher at St. Martin's? And I was like, yeah, that's my mom. She's taught at St. Martin's for 20 years. And he goes, man, she was an awesome teacher. And he didn't even come into the house. He signed the permit and gave it to me. I was
That's
like,
awesome.
wow, it is awesome, because if the teachers, it's hard for them to see the positive impact that they have, because sometimes it's intangible. I mean, that was a very tangible, like very
Yeah.
transactional way of showing it, but um, it's a profession that I think it's taken for granted, particularly in the United States, way, way too much.
I'm really kind of, I feel like a sense of warmth knowing that your mom's had such an impact on someone's life that even that long, so many years down the line, it's still like, yeah, I owe her
Yeah,
one.
yeah, exactly. That was just his way of saying thanks. And, I benefited from it. And
Yeah.
when I told my mom about it, she remembered the kid too. She remembers this person from 20, actually at that point it would have been 30 years. Um, Hundreds of kids that some of them, would prefer probably not to remember.
So with the fact that Plan A did pan out and you've been in Clutch for over 30 years, which blows my mind. When I ever look at dates and I talk to bands, Deftones recently, Chino, Brandon Boyd of Incubus, I forget that these bands have had, over 25 years in the industry. I always think like it feels like it's only, 10 or 15.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever get chance with Clutch to take a real mature step back and see it from an outsider that the gigs were getting busier, that more people were buying your records each time, that more people would have your t-shirts on, or was that progression and the kind of growth of your band, were you just too involved? Were you just too much in the middle and it was too incorporated into you to be able to ever reflect and see just how much of an impact you had and how you grew over time? Because you can't ignore the fact that the small stages became main stages, the main stages became the top slots, the records were selling huge numbers, and then again, the milestone was beaten. So you have really progressed over time, but as a band, are you able to ever kind of really step back and see it?
Uh, yes and no. I mean, I guess to some degree, I've never seen Clutch perform.
You're pretty good, I won't lie.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, you're pretty damn good.
Um, I think going back, you said something earlier, like about bands sometimes come out of the gates with a huge hit,
Yeah,
and I think a lot of times that can be the death knell of a band, uh, because one, it's almost impossible to maintain that,
yeah,
and if you get a taste of life and all the things that follow the success of that, it's a very bitter pill to swallow to downscale. Um, and a lot of times people just throw their hands up. With Clutch, it's kind of it takes longer to build something, but it has more longevity in the long run. People
yeah,
are there for the show, not just that one song. um and I think for me that there's two maybe things that come to mind about like seeing this band in a different light. One, I don't think I can overstate how much the internet's changed people's way of getting music.
yeah,
We started this band out more, the internet wasn't a thing yet. I mean, it existed, but no one had, people were um, finding out about the shows in the local papers and flyers, and A&R representatives were the gatekeepers. And then all of a sudden that came smashing down and people could hear our band for free across the world.
yeah,
Um, and I think that didn't dawn upon me until we started like going to places in Europe, which I knew for a fact we had never been to before. We hadn't sold any albums there. And there's 3,000 people in a theater in Athens singing our songs. Like, what's going on here?
yeah. How did this happen?
Yeah,
Yeah,
what happened? Um, and then speaking from a more personal standpoint, like it was right before Earth Rocker came out. So that'd be like 2013. I had to get a surgery on my neck, and that required kind of yanking my voice box off to one side. And the doctor before the surgery told me in no uncertain terms, I can't guarantee if you're going to sing another note after this surgery.
Jesus, man.
So that was definitely like the dark night of the soul where I was like, man, I've been such an asshole. I've been taking all this for granted. And in hindsight, it was a very good exercise in humility and uh, appreciating what you have.
Yeah,
And uh, sometimes it sucks that it takes that much fear of God to sober you up. Um, but in hindsight, I'm glad it happened, because I now every show's just as important as the one that preceded it.
I think it's good that you'd never take anything for granted. I know you did up until that point, maybe without even realizing, and then that
Yeah,
kind of that shock of in an hour's time everything you've done could be taken away by an operation for your health. Like it's a
Mm.
scare, isn't it? It's the fright. But
Yeah, this, the I always like if you had asked me in 1994 what I thought about rock stars, and I would say, oh, it's awful, and I wouldn't have been able to see my own arrogance in a lot of ways because I was in it. This even with, we're not a stadium band, but this business can fuel an ego, and if left unchecked, it never ends well.
never. So I'm glad that you are grounded and you still appreciate every show that you have. And you guys, I've seen you many times in the UK, many festivals, and you always genuinely look like you're having a great time on stage. It doesn't ever seem forced. And one thing from being in the music industry for 10 years as doing journalism and interviewing through being a fan for 30 years, I have worked out now when bands are putting on a show. I can see
Yeah.
really, really well. It's very transparent when we're going through the motions. We probably haven't even spoke to each other as a band. We arrive at the venue, we go on stage, we do the same show, the same set list, even
Mhm.
the same talking in between the songs. It's even scheduled. They walk off and they probably go back to their own individual hotels and then see you tomorrow at another venue. But genuinely, and I'm not saying it because you're here, you go on stage and it looks like one of your first ever gigs. You have that energy and that desire to probably make every single person that's at that show want to dance to your songs. You want to move, you want to get everyone going. And I've seen you at Download, and I thought they could headline this. Like they are absolutely fucking killing it. Every single person is having a great time, beer in their hand, and you genuinely look like you're having the best day of your life.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
It's
Um,
true.
it is. I still get nervous before shows, and I think it's just because I care. And
Yeah.
sometimes there's like anxiety to a degree, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's good to be a little bit intimidated. Um, but yeah, I genuinely enjoy it. I mean, sure, there are times where like getting and screaming into a microphone is not on my very top thing to do at that point in time. But as soon as it starts, it's on, and it's like it's such a there are moments performing that can be very transcendent. I mean, yeah, we play kind of like, you know, pentatonic riff, hard rock music.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not the Mahavishnu Orchestra, but there are times when there's a synchronicity that can happen between the audience and the band. And I've seen it happen with other bands as well when I'm in the audience. It's like I said earlier, it could be a religious experience for in a way.
I see gigs as a church. Everyone's going there for the same reason. We all get the same sort of feelings and emotions, and you kind of will come together another time to do the same thing. It's weird. It's like you're the leaders, and we're there to sing and celebrate and forget all the shit in the world, and we leave with this sense of fulfillment. So it's
Mm.
my church.
I totally agree. I mean, if you think about it, that probably, as far as human history goes, that's our very first church, is
Yeah.
sitting in a circle, banging on a log at the fire, and
Yeah.
everyone's chanting. Um, Maybe chemically compromised, who knows? But I think that's like live performance is like a human sacrament, and I think it's because it's like transcendent, and as it's occurring, it's never going to occur again quite the same. That makes it the experience unique. That's one thing, when people talk about AI and music, and I have my opinions about that, but at the same time, I don't think the demand will ever go away for humans to want to watch other humans
Yeah.
bang on the log, because there's something instinctual and animalistic about in all of us that no tool will ever really replace, I don't think.
Ever. And as someone that pays, and there's bloody gigs every day announced at the moment, and I'm skint because every good band I ever loved is suddenly touring again. I absolutely cherish moments where I saw Pearl Jam in Manchester a few months ago,
Mm.
and they were playing, and they've been going, 35 years. Eddie Vedder's one of the greatest, and Mike McCready fluffed a note on the guitar, and it wasn't like a huge mistake where you'd be like, "Oh, fuck
Mm.
you, Mike McCready,"
Yeah.
but it made me realize that they're humans, and even Eddie laughed at him, and they looked at each other like, even after all this time, we're
Hmm.
humans. We're not robots. We're never going to play the song exactly the same every single night on a tour. And one of the biggest bands in the world making mistakes or changing a song or just having a different dynamic on that moment, that can never ever be taken away or recreated with anything to do with AI or robots or
No.
a fucking visual. It has to be the human element, and I will pay every night to see a band perform in a small venue or an arena, hoping for those moments of like humanity and just
Yeah.
it's
It's
authentic.
like true perfection. The only true perfection is death.
Yeah,
Perfection is boring and static and not dynamic. Uh, it's the imperfections that where I think where the beauty lies. I
massively.
mean, and I forget where I read this, but someone. It's sort of like the samurai chose the cherry blossom as their logo, more or less,
Yeah,
because of its transient nature. It blooms briefly and then dies.
yeah,
That's why things are beautiful, because they're only there momentarily, and that's the same with live music.
it's so true. And I suppose you answer my next question, which is why is it after 30 years? What is it that still makes you want to go on stage and do it when some bands just go, I've got backache. I can't be asked to do it anymore. I'd rather just get an early night, cup of tea, and go to bed. You are still hungry. I know you're still going to be on these big stages in 5, 10 years' time, still rocking out, still having a blast. And I don't think you're going to slow down anytime soon. And is it purely because of everything we've talked about today?
It is, and I think there's two things to say about that. One is people who have the creative impulse are never going to stop. I mean, you think about like bands that don't really need to. I mean, you hear about the Black Sabbath reunion. They don't really need to do that.
Never.
Why? Why? I mean, but no, they have this creative itch. I'm sure there's also a bit of a payday involved as well. However, I don't think someone like Ozzy Osbourne has to go out on stage for any other reason that he can't help himself.
No.
um,
Paul
so
McCartney
there's
as well. He's literally touring as we
better,
speak,
yeah.
and he does not need a paycheck.
No, no, he does it because he loves it, and it's like I almost went through the ceiling the other day when it was announced that Devo is going to be playing in Washington D.C. And I never thought I'd be able to see this band. Love Devo, and it's like all of a sudden I felt like a kid again. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go Devo. I'm gonna buy a T-shirt. It's gonna be rad.
Yeah.
Um, and I think also just from a writing standpoint, the just wanting to see what's around the corner and to make something out of nothing. I'm writing lyrics in this thing for songs that don't exist. Um, just because that's what I like to do in my free time. And yeah, it may be my job, but this is more my
That's just your creative
how.
output, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't watch the Super Bowl last night.
No.
I, I played my guitar.
Is that indication with the notepad that you are in the mindset right now to focus on new clutch, new album, new material? I know you've not got anyone with a gun at your head saying you need to get an album out this week, but are you in
Yeah,
the process where you're like, actually, I've got the itch. I feel like we're ready to get some demos out and start the next cycle?
yeah, we're writing. Now it's taken longer than I think we would have liked to have. But to be honest, we toured a lot in the past 3 years, like really grounded down it to the point, you know, when you come home from tour, you don't want to turn around the next day and say, let's get together and write a song. You got to take
Yeah,
a bit
I'll
of a
see you in
break.
6 months, guys. Yeah,
Yeah. We took off like maybe 4 weeks and then
yeah,
got back together. And we get together maybe once, twice a week,
yeah.
um, for 4 or 5 hours. And but again, it's like you gotta write a lot of garbage to get to the good stuff. And it seems the less premeditated it is, and those are the songs that end up as part of the canon. The, uh, almost the accidental songs. Those are the ones that seem to be the best.
And is there any? I know obviously you've just come back and been doing 3 years of touring, but are you looking at the point of hopefully it won't be too long until we see you in Europe and the UK anytime soon? That's just for my selfish reasons of wanting to come and see you guys play again.
No, we'll be back in the UK and Europe at the end of this year, November and December. We're going to I believe we're playing the Roundhouse. I don't know where you are in the UK.
Birmingham, but I can get to the
Birmingham.
Roundhouse. Yeah.
I think we might even have a Birmingham date. I'd have to take a look. But yeah, to answer your question, so in about probably December would be my guess.
And is there ever in you a project away from Clutch now, or is it just Clutch? I mean, are you looking that you could do like in the next couple of years your own solo album or ideas that aren't ready to be used with Clutch that might just fit into a different bracket that might fall into a different band that
Mm.
you feel could be something, or is it just my heart's Clutch and that's all I'm focusing on right now at this period in my life?
Um, I've written a handful of solo works, for lack of a better word, just because they never ended up in the hands of the band.
Yeah,
Not because I'm keeping it a secret, just got to listen to it. And it's like, I don't think this is gonna make a lot of sense.
yeah,
Um, Trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. But and I don't have any interest in being in another band.
no,
You know, I don't. All my, you know, I feel very satisfied with where I'm at. Um, the only other thing I'm kind of occupy my time with is, you know, I've taken up oil painting, which I used to do when I was really young, and I find it to be a very good distraction from music. And a lot of times I come up with lyrics when I'm doing that instead of sitting down in a blank piece of paper.
that's cool.
Uh, it's, you know, it's just another exercise to keep the creative brain in shape and not atrophy.
Would you share those? Would it ever be a book like Brandon Boyd, Incubus? He's got his own art gallery now. He has,
Oh, really?
he has
Maybe
people
once I get a
want,
little
yeah,
better. Not quite ready for prime time yet. And you know, the thing is, it's for my own satisfaction at this point.
and not
Um,
everything has to be for everyone, does it? Like,
yeah,
you know, I'm rubbish at art, but I might sit and sketch while prepping notes. They'd never need to be seen by anyone. They're just for me. But if you've got a talent and they're good, then maybe your fans would be like, "Fuck yeah, I want to see them."
yeah, maybe, but not yet though.
Future tour posters and merch should be yourself
There
that
you
does it.
go.
There you
Yeah,
go. That'll work.
that's another you know, another thing that like in life I was like I have an easel that I've had since 1988 that has been sitting in a storage room,
Wow.
you know, with that I set up last year because I was like, you know what, I'm 53 years old. When am I going to do this? And I've had like pretty much off since this fall and not going out on the road until April. I was like, well, if I look back on these, you know, 6 months with nothing to show for it, I'm going to really regret it.
Yeah. I think you're one of those people like me that just can't ever really have a proper holiday or time off. Even when I'm not recording, I'm working out what I'm going to do when I'm not recording and the next interview and researching and listening to new music and discovering bands that then I want to talk to. And I think my brain will just never say, just have a whole week off. Like I just can't. It's just in me. So I have to act on it.
No, I hear you. I find it very hard to like sit and watch a movie
Yeah.
or watch TV shows because I get antsy. I feel like I'm not producing anything of value.
It's
Even if
weird,
it's
isn't it? Isn't it weird?
yeah,
Like a 2 hour film feels like that could be 2 hours spent doing something you've already done for 30 years, but you feel guilty. I am telling myself, my wife's really big on it now. Like, look, just fucking come and watch this TV show. Like, just
yeah.
switch off. Like, just have an evening off. But even when I'm watching it, I might be then triggered by something and be like, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll try and get that person on.
Yeah.
I can't win.
No, I not to say I don't every once in a while enjoy just sitting watching a movie, but I usually have to be dragged, kicking
Yeah.
the screen to agree to it. Um, yeah, and usually it has to be really good for me to not be thinking about, lyrics because I'll be listening to dialogue. Listen, all right, give me a line.
I'm glad I've met someone else and it isn't just me. Sometimes I think like, how do people have these movie marathons and like watch 5 films in a day? And I'm like,
Oh
how do you
God,
do
no,
that? It's like
no, no, no,
that
no,
must be
no.
hell.
Yeah, I one and done. Thank you. Ops.
What I always end on the podcast with is, and it's always an interesting one because I've never changed it, but the answer's always different. Now, when this is all edited and I'm ready for the world to listen to our interview,
Hmm.
there'll be a piece of music at the start, so I'll put a clutch track in. There'll be one just as we finish talking. But to end the actual episode, every single guest that comes on the podcast gets to choose a song they love. Now, it doesn't need to be a clutch song. I prefer it not to be because there's a song or a piece of music that when I ask you the question today, Neil, that will probably come to your head and your heart above any other song. It might be a song that means a lot to you, might have a reason for someone in your family that makes you think of this certain piece of music. But I know as a musician, there might be 10 million songs in your head right now. But is there a song that personally means a lot to you that when this is all ready for the world to listen to, it plays out and kind of it sums up our interview. It's perfect for you. It's a personal choice, and if there is a reason why, I'd love to know it.
Okay. There's one that comes to mind, and I've mentioned it in other interviews, so sorry if it's redundant. But I think the best songs are when the lyrics and the mood of the music sync up.
Yeah,
Like sometimes, I'm sure it's the same with everybody. If you listen to the music, it's like this movie's playing in your head, and whoever wrote the lyrics is like watching the same movie as you. And I think one of the best examples for that, quite possibly one of my favorite songs of all time, is Time by Pink Floyd.
oh, wow.
Um, the opening of that, it's so cinematic,
Yeah,
and the lyrics are so heavy, they're philosophical, they're morose, they're reflections on mortality. And we talked about that a bit in this interview. And I think that's time and the abuse of it or mismanagement of it can be a real bummer. So listen to Pink Floyd. They got good advice. Is that a Cairn Terrier behind you?
it's just a small little Yorkshire Terrier.
Oh, okay.
So she's 17. She's a little grandma, but she likes to sit in on the interviews, and she I don't know if you can see her, but she just likes
Uh,
to sit and I call her my
17.
I call her my producer. But yeah, she's a little grandma, but she's still going and she still enjoys life, and
Excellent.
she's a happy little soul. So she doesn't always get a mention, but some people always see her just moving around, and then
Yeah, we have a Cairn Terrier in our lives, which she's only 5, so she rarely sits still.
I was
But
going to say, so all your energy's gone.
yeah,
gone. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how terriers have this nature and energy like no other dog because she thinks she's as big as an Alsatian. If you
oh
see
yeah,
a massive German Shepherd walk past, she will scare the shepherd off. She'll be like, rah, rah, rah. And they're like, I'm like, Florence, you're literally this big. But I
yeah,
don't know. I love it.
delusions.
I absolutely
Yeah,
love it. I wish I had
good.
the confidence of her.
Yeah, yeah. The our dog Stevie's the same way. It's sometimes I have to just pick her up and turn around because she will take on anything.
So sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed dad. But Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've met you at festivals, and it's always been a bit rushed at download. And I'd probably get 5 minutes with you in 10 minutes. And I'm so grateful that we actually got to sit down and do a whole episode because that's the best way always. And I enjoy everyone's time, and I'm very appreciative of people at festivals. But when it's a band that means so much to me, like Clutch, I always wanted it to be in the comfort of my own home, for no one in the background saying 2 minutes left. So I'm
Oh,
really
yeah, yeah.
grateful.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Mark.
It's
It's
an
good.
absolute pleasure. I'll let everyone know that there's a new album one day coming soon, and if people
Yeah.
want to pause and zoom in on your notepad, they might get a secret lyric that they saw. Or
Oh, yeah. Good luck. Let me know. I need all the help I can get.
but thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. And as
You
soon as
too.
any UK tours announced in December, I will come. I'll buy you a drink, and we'll say hello.
Sounds good.
Dream with the feathers of angels stuck beneath your head. The regulator, swinging pendulum. Dream with the feathers of angels stuck beneath your head. The regulator, swinging pendulum.
So there's my interview with me and Neil Fallon. What an amazing guy. Like I said, I think on today's interview, I don't know why it's taken so long for me to actually sit down with Neil, because I've been at festivals with him in the past when they've been doing press, but you get so limited time with these people that it's not really long enough. I'm always grateful, but with a band like Clutch that I've loved for so many years, it always needed an individual episode dedicated to Clutch. So I'm so happy that Neil's come on. I love the interview. And I'm so excited now for the end of the year to go and see them again, because if you've ever seen Clutch, they put everything into their performances. They're just electric, and I can't wait. If you're sitting there now and you've enjoyed today's interview and you're a fan of Clutch, please share the episode. You know the score by now. You surely have a Facebook account or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. Whatever you use, if you just share the episode, it's literally the click of a couple of buttons. It makes a huge difference to Mark and me. People don't realise, but Mark and me is just me. I'm a one-man team. I go out there, I get these interviews, I do the interviews, I edit, and then I market it as much as I can. And I hate the word market, but I get the name out there and ask all the people that listen to share it. And it really goes a long way. So you might think, shall I share it on Twitter or hit that retweet button or put it as a story on Instagram? The correct answer is yes, please do, because I'm an independent podcaster and it goes a long way for you just literally sharing the episode. I do also have a Patreon account to keep the podcast going and host it on stuff like Podomatic, and Spotify and Apple Podcasts cost actually money. So if you do love the episodes and want to go that little bit further and support me, there's a link on markandme.com, and in return for signing up and paying literally £1 a month, you're guaranteed exclusive episodes that are only available to you guys on Patreon. You get a welcome pack which includes stickers, a badge and so much more. And not only that, I have a newsletter, and hey, it all goes right back into the production of the podcast. I don't pay myself. It just means that I can keep the episodes coming for you each and every week. Also, before I go, I want to give a shout out to the sponsors of the podcast. Firstly, Vice Press. If you're a movie fan and love posters and prints, all their stuff is licensed. And the good thing is, if you head over to vicepress.com, add anything to your basket and put in the code MarkandMe10, that's the number 10, you will get 10% off your first purchase. And also a shout out to the second sponsor of Mark and Me, Richer Sounds. If you listen to great bands like Clutch and want to get yourself some speakers, some headphones, or a brand new TV, go over to richersounds.com or visit any of their high street stores. They won't be beaten on price, and have supported Mark and Me now for a few years, and I genuinely wouldn't be able to do the podcast without them. So thanks so much to both of those sponsors. Now I'm going to be back in only a few days' time with another episode of Mark and Me. The guest is a returning guest, a huge singer from an amazing band, but that's all I'm going to leave you with. That's the tease you're getting, but it will all be revealed in a couple of days' time. Right, thanks for listening today. Look after yourself. Go and listen to Clutch. Go and buy a ticket to Clutch, and I'll see you all very soon.
sunshine, staying home to watch the rain. And you are young and life is long, and there is time to kill today. And then one day you find 10 years have gone behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun.
their knees. You hear the softly spoken by